Welcome everyone to today's Pink Elephant webinar, a Zen approach to Lean IT Kaizen. My name is Gary Case, I'm Principal Consultant, and I'm going to be your speaker today. We have a lot of material to cover, so let's go on ahead and get a start on this here. When we look at the agenda here, we're going to talk first off just about introductory around Lean Kaizen, what a little bit about Lean and Kaizen is, how well they fit together, because we have people who are probably experts in this and others who may be just starting their journey around Lean. We'll talk about the activities and the child pose, Lean activities and the tree pose, and also the Lean activities and the warrior pose. As you saw in the session description, how these are written up, and so we will go on ahead and take a look at each one of those. So first off, the introduction. When we talk about Lean Kaizen, we got to think about what each one of those words mean. Lean is just simply a proven methodology, a proven practice. It's all focused on eliminating waste and adding more value out to the customer. And Kaizen just means continuous improvement. So together, it is just simply we have a structured approach that we're going to apply, and it's all about continuously implementing improvements by identifying and removing any of the waste that we find oftentimes in our processes. And so it's key when we start thinking about how this all ties together, and it is about continuously, so it's not reactive, but it's always going to be very proactive is what we're really looking for. So it really starts with the Toyota production system and really the Toyota way. And as this got started off, there were two things that are consistent within TPS that is still honored as a tradition, as a part of the Toyota way today. And it applies to every organization, as far as I'm concerned, of those who want to go on ahead and actually use Lean in their organization. And that is about continual improvement. It's always looking to get better. And it's also showing a huge respect for people, for everyone at all levels of the organization, because that's really incredibly important, because Lean is not done by a department or a group of people. Lean is done by everyone in the organization, from management throughout all the different staff levels that we do have, and we have to respect each and every one of those. And in fact, from a Lean perspective, we often look at our frontline staff who are close working with the customers, that looking for them to identify the problems and identify the solutions that we can work on to do the continuous improvement that we always want to be focused on. So Lean is really, it's a way of thinking and it's a way of acting that is out there. And I would tell you from experiences that the way we act carries a much stronger message than the way we think, and even sometimes how we verbalize our thinking in terms of words and what we're saying. So that acting is absolutely so incredibly important, and that whole thinking process has to be about the improvements, and it has to have the focus on the customers. It has to be thinking in terms of improving our flow by leveling our variances and that we have, and the peaks and valleys in our processes, identifying and just getting rid of that waste as much as possible. We have to involve, as I said earlier, everyone needs to play a role in this. We cannot start pointing fingers to other people that it's their responsibility. Everyone really needs to do it. And one of the key areas here is from a Lean perspective, it's very important that, number one, each of you develop yourself and then also work to develop others, because that's a key part of Lean. You want to be, develop yourself, then become coach, mentors, teachers, are all key things that we want to think in terms of and understand what those goals are. It's always about continually improving. And one of the key statements that you see down in the bottom right-hand corner there is, and I'm going to give you another statement here first, because everyone has heard this statement, and that is basically do more with less. And from a Lean perspective, think about it a little bit differently. Do more by doing less. So in other words, get rid of any of those non-value added activities that we really deal with on a day-to-day basis. And you have to have visibility around it, because if you cannot make your work visible, you cannot manage and govern it. So that's a big part of what we want to be thinking about is, doing and creating our value stream maps, so we can start understanding and gathering data around what we need on our process, and because you'd have a value stream map for each process, and ultimately understand all of your areas of waste, variances, any constraints and bottlenecks that we're running into, so that we can identify the improvement opportunities that we really do have. Just overall, if we just think about this, it's all about the customer. It's always the focus that we have. It's always about that value. It's about improving and increasing the value that customers are getting into. When we talk about the value stream that I mentioned, it's really just assessing all the different activities in the process, and really having a tough discussion around, is that added value in the eyes of the customer. And because the customers are the only ones that can say if they get value or not, and we got to listen to them, and that's the importance of doing voice of customer, which is also another part of Lean. Then we look at, from our process perspective, of how do we improve the flow, and that is all to improve so that we can have reduced lead time, which is from the time that the customer triggers something until the time that we deliver something that is going to be out there. And again, with that flow, it goes back into reducing constraints, bottlenecks, as well as any peaks and valleys, which is your variation in how we're performing our overall process. Lean also uses a key principle around pull, where we make sure that demand is actually triggered, the stock that we have and the work that we're going to do, and we pull it through the system. So in other words, the customer is the trigger point. It's not that we are going to start building something without any input in there from the customer. And one of the key things that I think is incredibly important for everyone to keep a focus on is this whole, aim for perfection and first time right. It's all about the quality. It's all about how do we get rid of the defects and continue to improve our quality that we want to really take a look at, because that's going to be the key. So when we start talking about Lean activities in the child pose, this is kind of the introductory. This is kind of the beginning of what it is. So it's about a learning stage and an education stage, which is so incredibly important that we have to think about. And so you want to make sure that you provide for yourself, but also for others and your team and other teams, provide them the opportunity to understand what Lean is, understand the benefits that Lean is going to provide you, understand some of the key skills. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but you need to provide them the opportunity to be successful in starting their Lean journey. And so provide, Lean IT training, whether it's overview, whether it's certification courses or whatever, and, it could be at the foundation level that you have to start with, and then you could go into Lean IT Kaizen, Lean IT leadership, whatever. But we really have to think in terms that we provide the ability for people to learn, to grow, and to gain experiences, and to gain the knowledge and expertise and the skills that they need to move this forward, because that is really, when we start thinking about that initial pose, it's all about that learning and getting started, and that's really what it is, because Lean IT will really help you when we start thinking about, that approach that we need and how it's going to make our lives a lot easier, and again, add that value that the customer is going to be receiving out there also. Simply by taking away a lot of that non-value add activity, now we have a sense of purpose. People can see the activities that they're performing, how it has a direct, to the results that customers are, wanting to achieve. They have that line of sight, so to speak, that we have to think about. So part of that is being able to educate and have people understand there's a difference between, two types of Kaizen. There's a daily Kaizen, and then there's the improvement Kaizens also. And the daily Kaizen is probably closest related to the Kaizen mindset, simply because every day we are looking for changes that we can see and identify are needed in the organization, because we either have a lot of waste going going on. We have an activity. We're not doing anything with that. We're creating a lot of reports. Maybe people are not on a daily basis, but nobody looks at the reports. Nobody uses the reports. So it's really just a part of our mindset, and it becomes a part of our DNA that we wouldn't think about doing this any differently. And when you really adopt Lean, it not only changes your professional life, but it changes your personal life also, because you don't look at things in the same way, because you always start thinking in terms of, is this really the best way to be doing this particular process, whatever it may be. Kaizen events can be anything from, I've had them as short as 1-day events to 5-day events, but it has a very structured approach, and it has a reason of what you're trying to do. So you've already identified a problem up front, and it's really about carrying out that particular Kaizen event over a period of time of 1 or to 5 days. And I've had it all the way in between that, because that is what helps us understand also, just as well as a daily Kaizen, it's about the incremental changes. It's not about we have to have all the big bang changes that take months to prepare, but it's about incremental changes that we can get in place very fast as we go through them. So a part of when we start thinking about this is understanding the DMAIC model, and this helps with that structure that is out there, and it is just an extension, if you're familiar with the Deming cycle of the plan, do, check, act, and because it fits very nicely, and that's where it really came out of, was from Six Sigma, adapting and creating, I guess we could even say, because that's what they did, the DMAIC model, and it works very nicely when we start talking about these very structured events. So, the define is just simply defining, overall what that problem statement really is, and you get your teams together and chartering and all of that, that you have to look at. Measurements is always about where you're gathering all your data, you're documenting what that process is, you're putting your data, that's going to be very clear out there to support your value stream map, but this gives you your current state information that you need to know. And then the analyze phase, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that is very key, where we take a look at all the data, we analyze the data, we look for trends, we look for improvement opportunities, but the key with the analyze is we're doing root cause analysis. And that means we truly want to get to the root cause, and not always the symptom of the root cause, where sometimes we end up stopping at. But I'll talk a little bit later on about some concepts that there may be a point in time that even if we can do some, resolution around some of the symptoms, that's still improving, which we have to take a look at. And that's what the I is about improving, and that's about all those alternatives and options that we have for solutions, and then going on ahead and picking what we think are going to be the best solution or solutions that are out there. Well, we work with a customer, and they've shared that they had one particular Kaizen event they ran, and they ended up with 6 solutions they identified, and they were able to implement 5 of those 6. So that's going to be very important. And then the C is basically control, and that's really where we start looking at how do we control the process going forward how do we sustain that, how do we have it anchored or institutionalized, whatever terms you like to use, but how do we ensure that we're not going to fall backwards to the old way of doing things. So control is very important, but I could say each and every one of these steps in the DMAIC model are very important also. And we have to make sure that, again, we go back to the education, the expertise, the knowledge, the skills that's a part of that learning as a part of the child pose, that is going to be very important there. These are some different skills and behaviors that we look at. So these may not be the skills and behaviors you typically are going to be looking for when you start thinking about hiring people for IT, but this is absolutely the kind of skills and behaviors that we need, when we're starting to think about Lean Kaizen, we're starting to think about Kaizen events, the daily Kaizens that we have to take a look at. And I'm not going to go on ahead and cover all these bullets, but when we talk about flexible in your approach, again, you want to use a structured approach, whether it's the A3 or the DMAIC model. but we want to be flexible how we apply that. So it's going to be different than in a 5-day event versus a 3-day event. So we have to be somewhat flexible about that approach that we're going to take, because that's going to be very important. And that last bullet, I think, is always key also, because Lean is about being a learning organization. From my perspective, that's key. So we've really got to have that desire for our abilities to coach and mentor and be teachers as leaders also, I think, are very key. That's there. We cannot do Lean Kaizen without thinking of the customer. They're at the center of really everything that we have to take a look at, and we have to do, and we have to have the interactions with on an ongoing basis. So basically, most organizations are all, I don't want to say necessarily struggling, but what I would say is that they're aware of there's this push around better, faster, cheaper. And those are all things every organization is trying to manage, and that's where Lean comes into play. It's really addressing our ability for the better, so the quality, because Lean is about improving quality. Because we get rid of waste and we improve the flow, we can address the faster also. And when we have the better and we have the faster, then it actually costs us much less money to go on ahead and provide our services and to provide solutions to our services and continue to have that value delivery to our customers that are out there. And those are all things that we have to think in terms of. So there's a lot of power when we start thinking about Lean Kaizen, of how it helps address this overall better, faster, cheaper, and it's a win-win-win across the board there. Customers are much happier. They get more ability to get the results that they want to achieve. They have better consistency. So it truly is something that we want to take a look at on an ongoing basis. So when we start talking about the Lean activities and the tree pose, this is where I want to talk a little bit more about the analyze phase, and about how that may fit in with what we do. If you're familiar with ITIL, and many organizations that are attending this webinar are using ITIL. Some of you are already getting ramped up for ITIL 4. I'm pretty sure. But when we think about this, it's not conflicting. A lot of times people will think that, Lean conflicts with ITIL or vice versa or whatever, but they're very, very complementary in how they actually do work together. So when we think about the analyze phase, again, we have to have the data that we get from the measurement phase that is there. We've got to be honest when we're gathering the data. We have to be very honest when we're doing our analysis also for the data. We got to be looking for trends and understanding, is this a good trend or a bad trend that we have out there. And we really have to get into the overall root cause, and we'll talk about some different methods that we can really use, because that's the key areas, being able to understand if there truly is a root cause, but also just simply if we can identify improvements, if we can identify non-value add activities, if we can identify any other waste such as wait time in between steps, then it becomes a true win-win for everybody. So think in terms of also when we start thinking about some goals that we want to look for from a Lean Kaizen mindset here. We can always think in terms of fully resolving, and that's something that could be good. We can also think about partially resolving. We might not be able to fix everything, but if we can partially resolve, that's a plus. And also we can just simply improve. And so we have to have that mindset that we can do all three of these that are out there. And yes, we always want to try to achieve that fully resolve, but if we just simply improve, that's a win. If I'm better next month than I was this month, that's a win. And we got to put that feather in our cap and not always say, well, we failed because we didn't get to the true root cause and fully resolve everything. We have to take the wins as we can get them. So very complementary between ITIL and the DMAIC model that is out there. They both very much focus on, with problem management and continual service improvement as a part of ITIL, and of course DMAIC as a part of Lean IT. It's all about the customer value. It's about the quality. It's about the processes. It's about measurements. All of those are complementary. The exact same thing that we talk about in ITIL that we talk about in Lean IT that is out there. So don't think about it being competitive. Think about how it complements one another, how they can be used in conjunction with one another, because those are all key things. Problem management is about root cause analysis. That's what we're looking for in the analyze phase, is root cause. So think about how they work together, and don't do these things in a silo. So don't do Lean in a silo and do ITIL in a silo. Think about them from an integrated perspective. When we start talking about integrated service management, that is all the integrations, not only of Lean and ITIL, but Agile and DevOps, etc., that we have to think about, that they have to work together. So don't have a mindset around they have to be separate. Think in terms how you can actually integrate those to make things much better. So also from a root cause analysis, there's all kinds of tools that are out there that support root cause analysis. And think again here about how we can use an integrated approach with some of these different tools. So I like to use, especially if I'm brought in, if a company is struggling with finding a root cause, just start with brainstorming. Based on all the data we have, let's forget everything we've done up to now. Let's just brainstorm what could be potential causes based upon that. Then you can do affinity mapping, where you basically are saying what are the logical groupings that we have, and then you put together those logical groupings, and they ultimately become your first tier of your fishbone diagram, which you'll see here in a second, just an example. And then also we can apply the 5 whys as an analysis technique also to the fishbone diagram. And that's what I'm showing here, is just, and again, that first level tiers of a policy, process, system, people. You can call those whatever you would want, but those would be those logical groupings that may, look at what could be potential causes of this, and then you can use the 5 why analysis method when you get down into the details of each one of those. And the 5 why is also a very powerful tool, and if you want to have a good working example of that, just do Google search or whatever on 5 whys, Jefferson Memorial, I think it is, and it'll give you a real world of what those 5 whys really are. One of the things that we like to talk about is having a template that I think would be good, that you basically are going to start with a problem statement, and then you're going to ask your first question, and then when you get the answer to that first question, this is where you want to start thinking about solving symptoms or improving. Just simply, how would you improve that response you just got on that particular answer? Think about that. You're not doing it while you're going through, but you want to go back and look about how can we improve that. And then the next question that would be driven from how they answered the first one. And the same concept, when they come up with their second answer, how would you improve that? So use a combination of, again, techniques to think about how we can continue to improve, because simply improving is a good step, partially resolving is a good step, and fully resolving, of course, is a good step also. But use a template like this to always kind of challenge your mindset and your way of thinking, and saying, well, I may not be able to solve the entire thing, but can I make some improvements around what we're doing based upon the answers that we are getting back from the questions that we are asking about that particular problem statement that we do have. So here's another example of something that you can help use in the analyze phase, and it's called a cause and effect diagram. And so you're looking at this from having different variables. So you got input variables, and your input variables could be your process steps, it could be your people, it could be your knowledge, it could be your tool, it could be policy, it could be anything that could potentially have a causal causal effect on that particular problem. And so what you do is you want to go on ahead and start off with the top part first. Always address the customer. So what are the most important things that is of importance for those customers that you're working with at that point in time? So this is around incident management that I've put together for the Kaizen class that I share with the students there. And first here is just timely incident resolution, treated with respect, and also timely status updates that's there. So when you go through and you start looking at these importance, you could have 4, 5, 6 things. This is just an example. I just pulled in the first 3 here. And then on the left-hand side is what are those variables and process steps that you're going to look at that could have a direct impact to that customer's importance there. And as you can see, the customer importance has a rating, let's say, of 1 to 10. In this case, it's 10, 10, and 8. And then we would do the exact same thing. We would apply a rating of knowledge of the team as an example on a scale of 1 to 10. How much would the knowledge of the team have a direct impact into the timely incident resolution and treated with respect? Again, 10, 10, and then timely status updates would be a 7. And it's a way to look at what you're doing, what you're putting together. You've given some thought around, the customer importance. You've given thought into your independent variables or the input variables that we have. And you know that not everything is going to be the same, and it's going to give you some areas that you really want to take a look at for some of your overall improvements. And the math is just simply when you look at 10 times, 10 times 10, and then 8 times 7, it just comes up to 256. And that's all you're doing is the math of the customer importance with that particular field of the knowledge of the team. And that first one is a 10 and a 10. So 10 times 10 is 100, and so on as you go through. And this helps you also then end up with a rating scale that you can look at and say that if I need to do some improvements, this is an area that we can start thinking about where do we improve in. So when we think about lean activities and the warrior pose, this is about, there's many different warrior poses as you can see here. There's 3, and that means, who do we need to have as part of our roles and responsibilities? Well, first off, we need to have the sponsor. They're absolutely incredibly important, and they have to have a vested interest in making sure this problem is going to be resolved. They actually select the initiative that they want to do the improvements around. They help facilitate the team selection. They understand and help decide resources that are going to be required. They have to participate, not throughout the entire event, but they probably should kick it off and then be there at the end when there's a debrief around what they came up with. One of the most powerful things the sponsor needs to do, though, is to really go on ahead and remove any barriers, constraints, or roadblocks that are having an impact on this particular Kaizen team of being able to do the Kaizen event and successfully. So sometimes that's about not allowing resources to be pulled out because somebody else wants them to do something. Those are all key things that we have to think in terms of. Then you have the Kaizen lead. They kind of facilitate the event. They don't make all the decisions, but they simply facilitate it. They keep the spirit of Kaizen alive throughout the entire event. Yes, they're going to play a part in creating that charter along with the sponsor. They're going to make sure all the logistics are taken care of, but their main function is really going to be, helping everybody forward so that they can be very successful. And so they have to have very good facilitation skills as they go through this particular area. Then we get into the Kaizen team members. And these are the groups that pull everything together. They do the actual work in the Kaizen event. And you want to have people who, again, are vested in getting this particular problem resolved. They have to have that desire to do that. You want to have people on the team that represents the life cycle of that particular process. So from beginning to end, We want to make sure that we have people who have the ability to get to the data, wherever that data may be stored, and that could be stored in a tool, or your ITSM tool, or it could be stored in event logs, or it could be stored in any other repository that we have out there. They've got to have, again, going back to the child pose, they've got to have that knowledge on how to conduct root cause analysis also, and make sure that they and when I use the word challenging, don't take it negative, but we always have to make sure we challenge ourselves. That are we in a box, or are we outside the box thinking differently? Because sometimes we get caught up, well, we've always done it this way, and we got to think outside and think a little bit differently. But the team members play an absolutely incredible part that's going to be there. So in conclusion, I know I've gone very fast, but I believe this presentation and audio recording will be provided. We usually do that all the time, so feel free to look and go through this again. But when we think about this, we have to change our team's way of thinking and acting. We have to change their behaviors also right up front. We need to make sure that we're very proactive in what we're doing. We need to make sure that we provide them every opportunity to be successful. So make sure we provide the right capability for their education, for their more knowledge, addressing more expertise that is going to be out there, and skills. All of that has to be very important that's there. But a key also is we have to give them time to actually improve. And we don't give people time to do the improvement activities simply because we often are so busy firefighting, we never get to that level of doing the actual proactive improvements that are there. And you just have to start doing something. Now, this is specific about Kaizen events, but look at your Lean, within your organization. If you're saying you're doing Lean, is there evidence around it? Are you running Kaizen events? Do you have visual management boards up? Do you have A3s? Are people doing Gembas where they go to the work where the work is being performed? So think about all of that as we go through here. And with that, I just want to say thank you, and I sure hope we get to see everybody at the conference coming up here starting on February 17th through the 20th in Las Vegas, and I look forward to meeting everybody. So everyone, thank you so much for your attention today, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks.